want to talk about foreclosures for a second. There were 930,000 properties in the United States were hit by foreclosure actions just in the third quarter, affecting 1 in every 139 homes. There's now a freeze on foreclosures, prompted by the case of a woman in Maine who had not paid her mortgage in 2 years after losing her job. And the whole debate is because apparently a lot of these banks were not signing off properly, and there were some accusations of fraud that have happened. Now, a lot of folks in the real estate industry and banks, some of whom are in this room, probably aren't happy about the fact they've got this freeze on foreclosures because, you know, a lot of these homes, when they get sold, that's a lot of business for real estate brokers and banks, and they want to be able to get their money back. What do you think Congress ought to be doing to either help the banks, the lenders, or the people who are having their homes foreclosed? Is there a role for Congress in what is a true crisis going across this country in foreclosures? And Kenny Golden, I'll start with you.
Okay, thanks. I have a home in Manassas, and the young man that lived next to me 2 years ago when I was working up there, he was an auto mechanic, so he wasn't making a huge amount of money. He was a young man, but he wasn't married, and he bought a house which was similar to mine. It was about a $600,000 mortgage. Came over one day as I was getting ready to leave to come back here and said, by the way, I won't be here when you come back. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I'm going to just let the house go. I said, what do you mean you're going to let it go? He said, well, I'm just going to walk away from it. He's been in the home for 3 years and made the payments, but he was now about 8 months behind in payments. Okay? He should have never been loaned the money for that home. There was no way he could make the I think it was a $2,500 mortgage that he had to pay at least, and there was no way he could make that in a month. So he should have never been loaned that home. But there are other people out there that have seen the type of environment that you talked about, Joel, that you outlined here. And of course, those people have fallen under hard times. What I think our role is I don't have a problem with holding those because many of the banks would rather see somebody come back, renegotiate the loan, and continue on with the house rather than try to resell it and lose the value. So what our job would be to find some money, put it back in the liquidity portion of the banks, and have them loan it back to those people that could afford the houses, and we'd have to come up with a determination. Those people that could afford the houses to stay in the houses, I'd rather see them stay in the houses. So I like the idea of stopping the mortgage foreclosure.
Mr. Richard.
Well, I think to chart a way forward, we need to reflect just for a moment on how we got here. I truly believe that government played too heavy a hand in this. Congressman Frank and Barney Frank, I believe that he exercised too much influence in really pushing it to where regulations were really forcing banks to make loans to people who really couldn't qualify for them. So there's a basic philosophical debate taking place here, which is the proper role of government in our economy. And I'd say that with respect to banking, I think government is, and the foreclosure matters here, that the government would exercise too much influence. And my concern now is that it's lurched back too far the other way. I see my friends who are bankers here. I've spoken with many of you privately and in other settings. Just deeply concerned about how this regulatory reform now has got so many of our bankers not hiring account executives for small businesses, but more regulatory analysts. If there is evidence that banks are in any kind of arbitrary way foreclosing on homes, the government has a proper role in ensuring that that does not take place. But the number one way to help not only our builders who are here today, but frankly car dealers as well, we're all attached at the hip in this economy. What's good for our builders, what's good for our home buyers, what's good for our mortgage bankers. If you're a mortgage banker here today, we're all in this together. The number one way to help the most people is to get our economy going again and get job creation started again. And there's only one candidate here on the podium. They're good men, but there's only one candidate who's actually had the great privilege and joy of saying this hundreds and hundreds, really, I'm sure thousands of times in my career. You're hired. I understand the environment that we need to create jobs here in Hampton Roads, and I want to bring that leadership up to Congress. It'll help foreclosures and retail sales in all sectors.
Can I follow up with you on that? seen your ad. And I'll follow up on that a little. Well, let me ask him a question first, and I'll get you to Kenny. A lot of the problem in Washington, though, is that we have maybe too many people working for the government, so somebody's got to say you're fired.
That's correct.
And
I've done that too.
okay. If somebody's phone is on, please everybody turn off your. What was my phone?
That's one.
Yeah. The issue really is who are you going to fire?
That's correct.
And that seems to be a question that I want all the candidates to respond to this. Where are you willing to cut? We have $1 trillion deficit. And a lot of that is in salaries, obviously, at all levels of government. And that really, I would think, is more the question about who you're firing, I mean, not so much who you're hiring. Is that a fair question?
Well, if the question is overall, how do we get control of spending, I'm ready. I've tackled this problem in my own business. I've been doing that for 30 years, reading financial statements and making good, I think, sound financial decisions. There's more zeros on the financial statement up in Washington, but the principles are the same. I would start by rolling back any of the unfunded TARP and stimulus funds. They've proven to be ineffective. Each job cost over $250,000 to, quote, create. Second, I would impose an immediate hiring freeze on the federal government in all sectors that did not directly affect national security. I would do there what we did in our own company, which is to let normal attrition and resignation take its normal path. There's no reason to arbitrarily lay people off of the federal government right now. It would only exasperate the problems that we're having in our economy and put them on unemployment, which is not wise. I would do exactly what Governor McDonald has done, and his leadership is such a great example for all of us, to surgically go in there. You can make cuts. It is a target-rich environment in all sectors, including defense. There are inefficiencies there. There's waste there. And having private sector mindset of requiring each department head not to spend all of their budget so that they can get the same amount next year.
I don't want you to get into a long answer here because I want to get back to Congressman Nye because he hasn't had a chance to respond on this foreclosure issue yet. What should be the role of Congress? What has been the role of Congress? How have you voted on this? What do you think the role of future should be?
Yeah, thank you. And now you've put a lot of things out for me to respond to, but I'll try to focus first
Start on that one.
on the foreclosure issue. And responding to the recent news about the freezing of foreclosure proceedings to determine if there's fraud in the process, excuse me, of course I support that, and we need to be able to figure out if there's fraud being perpetrated and root that out. At the end of the day, though, there is a limited role, and it's very limited, for the federal government intervening in foreclosure proceedings. I do think there was a role in helping bring to the table lenders and mortgage recipients to have a conversation to try to save those loans that were savable, where the mortgage holder actually has a job and can continue to pay the mortgage. But that's, again, a limited role to bring the two parties together. And at the end of the day, and I will actually agree with Scott on a point here. I know this is going to be breaking news here. Write this down, everyone. Look, at the end of the day, the best way we can help solve the foreclosure problem is to increase the strength of the economy, get people back to work, and then they can meet those payments. Now it's a larger question, but I think it's the crux of a lot of the issues we're facing, something we need to continue to work hard to tackle. There are some targeted things we can do, like, and I think we should bring back the home buyer tax credit for the first time or the second time home buyers. I've talked to a lot of realtors about it, and they've said it is helpful in incentivizing people to take the tough choice to go ahead and buy a home. But again, if somebody doesn't have the credit rating, or they've gone to the bank and the bank said, I can't give you the loan, it doesn't matter how big the credit is, they don't have the money to buy the loan. It's the same challenge that small business owners are facing, which is why I have worked recently to support legislation which provides not just tax breaks to small businesses, but a lending fund which will go through community-level banks, not Wall Street banks, but community-level banks, to make it easier for them to have loan capital that they can then lend on to viable small businesses who, right now, they see business out there, but they can't grow because they're not able to get that loan to expand their company. There's potential in the economy. We have to unlock that potential.
Kenny, did you want to add something back from his previous?
Well, you know, we keep hearing about job creation, particularly from Scott. He's talked about building jobs here and Happy Brothers. We're talking about 270 jobs. That's what you currently employ. We're talking about automobile dealerships. And you know, because we're friends, that I'm proud of you. the dealership that you've done, particularly you talked about where one of them is, and it's kind of tough. But we're not talking about 270 jobs. We're talking about thousands of jobs. We're talking about the big industry that has to come in here. We're talking about the biggest industry that we have here that affects everybody's industry in here, and that's the defense industry. That industry is what we have to watch out for, and that's the industry that's walking away from us now in Joint Forces Command and also with the 2 aircraft carriers that are leaving. You know, those are the things that need to be protected because they are the springboards to future industry that we need to bring here, which will employ thousands of people. We need to have that Ford plant operating again. Not necessarily making Fords, but making something. And we can do that if we go about it the right way. And I'm proposing, because I've dealt with big industry, both here in this country, and I had the privilege of doing it in Japan, and watching them and how they work, that's what we need to do, and I think I can do that.
All right, let me ask you.